Yeah.
Because I mean, even though we are big Mobb Deep fans, I think we could probably agree that after, let's say, about 2000, that was when HNIC came out, the first one, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
After that, Mobb seemed to go through, as a group, a bit of a downturn.
Right.
Infamy, I still listen to that album to this day, and there's some great songs on there. And I can say the same about America's Nightmare, and even the album Blood Money, which overall I really wasn't a fan of.
I'm gonna tell you, man. America's Nightmare was slept on to me. I thought that was tight.
Yeah, you know what? The more I listen to it now, I agree. And there was definitely some really, really good music on there. I think those Infamy, America's Nightmare, and Blood Money, you kind of see a bit of a dip from the highs of like Infamous, Hell on Earth, and Murder Music.
Sure.
But at the same time, when you look at Prodigy's solo output, you know, whether it was HNIC 2 or the Return of the Mac mixtape, or even one of my favorite things that he's ever done, believe it or not, is that Albert Einstein collaboration with Alchemist. I love that album. Love it.
Yeah.
You know, it seemed like, you know, he really kind of found his voice outside of that Mobb Deep formula and really started to put out, even with the prison stint and everything, really started to put out some really interesting, more experimental music. You know, it was still, you know, street and whatnot, but he started, his subject matter started to change up quite a bit too and get more into his views on religion and politics and things like that.
Right.
And I think that's another important part of his legacy is the fact that he grew as an artist. Like, you know, his music in the 90s really was dominated by the street life thing and everything like that. But once the 2000s hit, you start to see a shift. And as he got into his solo music, you start to see more varied subject matter, and he put out a lot of solo music too. From what I understand, there's even more to come.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And I mean, it was impressive to see him grow as an artist and a lyricist over that time. And I think in the last 10 years, he's kind of gained a whole new audience as far as younger people who are more listening to independent hip hop, and maybe they start listening to some of the newer guys like that came out in the last 10 years. And Prodigy did a lot of songs with them, so that's how a lot of them know who Prodigy is, more so than the Mobb stuff.
Right.
So I you know, it's been a hell of a journey, you know, seeing Prodigy and where he was going with his music. You know, I'm gonna miss him. It's even talking about it just now, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, he raised us, man. Like he raised us. He's like a musical uncle. You know what I'm saying? Like.
Yeah, definitely.
And and as you said, like, you know, the solo stuff, he was a little pigeonholed with the stuff he could do and talk about, you know, with the Mobb Deep sound. But once he, you know, like if you notice his features in the 90s, he was kicking more knowledge than the actual Mobb Deep albums.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about that.
You know,
you're right about that.
When he was able to step away, that's when he was able to like kind of give you that other side of P. You know, Illuminati on my mind, soul in my body, the society trying to keep their eye on me. You know, Fat Joe, or whether it's on Big Pun's, Tres Leches, you know, he spit on Capital Punishment. You know, and I believe he was on John Blaze. You know, if I can stand corrected, but
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So he
and
was
that song on Pete Rock's compilation album with Raekwon. Yeah, that was fiery. But yeah, you know, he always had those great features, and that's probably one of the most underrated things about him is his guest appearances on things were always tight.
Wicked.
You know, back then and even recently.
Yeah, wicked.
So yeah, man. It's
that Albert
Einstein has a hell of a legacy, and I would even say I think as far as a lot of the music that went like unreleased or a lot of the stuff that was collected on like Mobb Misses and other little compilation albums from the music from that era, I think a lot of his best work is on some of those songs. You know, a lot of those songs didn't even make murder music or Hell on Earth and things like that. Right. But if you go and listen to Mobb Misses and listen to those songs, like he had some killer verses on a lot of those songs. Like,
I agree.
I guess they were heavily bootlegged back then. That's why they didn't make the album, or for whatever reason.
Right.
But you know, a lot of that stuff is floating around out there. There's a lot of unreleased material. It's just like, you know, that just adds to his legacy.
For sure, man. And like the Mobb Misses was crazy. I remember. So I got a story for you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the barbershop, and this is like early 2000s, and
mm-hmm.
I don't know what it was. I was waiting to get it, waiting in the line to, get a haircut. And it's like these brothers on the side, and it's a black barbershop for those out there who don't know. So anything goes on in a black barbershop. You know what I mean?
Right.
You might have folks gambling over here. You might have some chicken over here. You might have some liquor over here.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're walking into.
Yep.
So
exactly.
So I'm just sitting waiting for a cut, and I see these two brothers on the side, and they talking about Mobb Deep. You know what I'm saying? And I think at the time maybe Infamy was about to drop or something. So mind you, this isn't even when they were red hot. They were still relevant, but they weren't like red hot.
Right.
And so the dude is talking about Mobb Deep, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like man, Mobb is my group, man. That's like my favorite group, And so the dude's like, yeah, and he's like, so then he starts testing me like, well, what's your favorite song? And I was like, man, I hit him for a doozy. I said right back at you on the Sunset Park soundtrack.
Right. Yeah.
And I know about that because of the Mobb Misses. Yeah. That was on Mobb Misses. I didn't have money to go get the soundtrack, but I remember that was on Mobb Misses. And once I said that, I earned dude's respect. And he pulled out a bottle of Hennessy, and he was like, "Yo, man, you want some of this? You know what I mean? Like, we chilling right now." So.
You know what? And it's funny. That's one of my favorite songs there because that's crazy. That was always because I knew it was on one of those soundtracks back then. And they had a song on the Bleed soundtrack too. As a matter of fact, that was hot. But yeah, man, a lot of the stuff that was on like Mobb Misses, I had heard some of that stuff back in the day because I used to get the DJ Crew mixtapes.
Right.
And they would always have something on a Crew mixtape, and people would have like dub cassettes of things that were played late night on the radio and stuff like that.
Right.
And I would hear these Mobb songs like throughout the years, but never saw them on any of the albums. I was happy about that,
right.
But it really just showed, a whole just how talented and how deep Mobb Deep's catalog really is,
For sure.
Absolutely, yeah, it's.
I can kind of play devil's advocate, and people say, even the Jay-Z shot kind of killed them, crippled them. But what I would say to that is, Prodigy was still able to maneuver a lucrative career after that. And the quality, the music was still the same. I think when people say, "Oh, his work went down after the Jay-Z diss," I think that's more of a Mobb Deep thing. That's not a Prodigy thing.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I can agree with that.
His bars, may have gotten a little sleepy, towards that little G-Unit era. But that was, we know what that was. That was the cause of circumstance.
Yeah. I really think with Blood Money, 50 Cent was on there too much, and I'm not anti 50 Cent dude.
Me neither.
I've always liked 50. He's done a lot of things that piss me off as a fan. I will say that. But as far as musically, as far as the fact that I feel he is a good rapper, there's no question. But I think when they signed the G Unit, 50 was more interested in trying to
Yeah.
And I felt like 50 was on there too much.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And looking at it from 50's POV, I mean, he respected Mobb Deep, you know, to the 10th degree, coming from Queens. And at the time, anything 50 was touching was just blowing up. So in his eyes, he's like, oh man, you got, you know, come with me, you know, and you can still make that gangster music, but we'll put you in a bigger platform. But I think like you said, what didn't translate was just he shouldn't have even been on there. You know what I mean? Like and I think future labels are getting it now. Like Duck Down has Young M.A., right? But Duck Down they're wise enough to say, you know what, you don't really need Buckshot on your record. You know what I mean?
Right? No.
Like let Young M.A. do Young M.A., and she can still be on Duck Down, but she's going to do her thing. And I think 50 should have just left Mobb Deep alone. Let them control. They, you know, they had Infamous Records. Like, you know, they were running the label. You know, they knew what to do. But I think that was the mistake at that point.
Yeah, and 50, you know, maybe a little bit ego got into it, but he figured, well, the more I'm on here, the more successful it will be.
Right.
And it was just like, nah, man.
Bro.
Like, I mean, and it's not like 50 doesn't sound good on Mobb Deep tracks. Because, I mean, look, Have did production for 50 after that album on a few of his projects.
Right.
But it was like, it was just more so what 50 was trying to do at the time and what Mobb Deep was known for really was kind of like on two different paths. And trying to push those together at that point, it, you know, there's some good songs on the album. It's not like a complete failure.
Right.
But I think as Mobb fans, we can agree that overall the direction on the album was not where it needed to be.
We hated that. We hated that move. Like when they went to June, I was so mad. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I didn't. I mean, I knew that. I knew that we'd get some good songs out of it because I felt like, you know, hearing Mobb and Lloyd Banks together would be cool. You know what I mean? Like Lloyd can spit, and he's not really interested in trying to go the commercial route. But I knew 50 was going to pop up on every other record. It was going to be, you know, a lot of strange R&B type collabos and things like that.
Right.
And it just wasn't, you know. I mean, not that Mobb dipped into the R&B collabo thing prior to that, but I felt like they did that on their own terms versus being kind of pushed into it. You know, luckily that only lasted that one album, and then they was able to go their separate ways after that. But you know, you're right. Mobb Deep's direction sort of began to change after the Jay-Z thing, but I don't think it was even a result of the Jay-Z thing. I think that maybe at that point, Mobb Deep as a duo, they had reached a certain plateau. I mean, because they put out, you know, 3 great albums.
Great.
They put out that Free Agent mixtape, which was really good.
We didn't mention that.
Like that. Yeah, that was excellent. And then, you know, all the stuff all the material that they put out that didn't make the album, you know, that was on Mobb Misses and all the mixtapes and soundtracks and stuff like that, which is probably another couple of albums worth of material.
Right.
Like, they did a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah. And
maybe, you know, they had reached a point where they needed to go more in their separate directions, you know, because Have started producing more for other people. And P started producing more, working more with Alchemist, which I think his relationship with Alchemist, if you want to say it rejuvenated him, you can say that.
I agree.
Yeah, because I think with Alchemist, he was able to express. He was still doing the street thing, able to express more of a different side of himself. You know, because Alchemist production and Hav's production, despite the fact that, you know, Have kind of mentored Alchemist, it's different. Right. It's a different feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I call Alchemist the light skinned Havoc. You know what I mean?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Because his sound is like a baby Mobb Deep, mixed with a little bit of Cypress hair. But yeah, I agree. Like him and Havoc is like, that's like two brothers close in age working together, and then him and Alchemist is like more